All right, welcome back, everyone. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into something that you have specifically asked to explore further, and that is the idea of respect.
Respect.
We've got such a fascinating mix of sources here. We're talking, we're covering everything from how respect plays out between genders, generations, to its role in history and in the workplace.
Yeah.
And we'll even touch on its, let's say, unique interpretation in the criminal world.
That contrast is definitely intriguing, but before we get to the tough guys, maybe it's worth pausing to think about what we even mean by respect. It's a word we throw around a lot, but do we always mean the same thing?
That's a great point. It's easy to assume that everyone is on the same page, but then you end up in these situations where someone feels disrespected and you didn't even realize it.
Exactly. At its core, respect comes down to acknowledging the inherent worth and dignity of every single person. And that doesn't mean you have to like them or agree with their every opinion.
Right. It's way more fundamental than that. It's like this baseline level of consideration that everyone just deserves by being human.
I think that's a great way to put it. And from that foundation, respect kind of branches out into a few key areas. For example, recognizing that every individual is unique with, their own experiences and perspectives. Respect means valuing those differences instead of trying to fit everyone into the same mold.
Yeah. So maybe instead of getting frustrated when someone disagrees with me, I should try to see it as a chance to learn about a different way of looking at things.
That's the spirit. It's about moving beyond just tolerating differences and actually seeing the value they bring to our lives. Think about a sports team. You need players with different strengths and skills to succeed. It's the same with society as a whole.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned earlier considering the impact of our actions on others.
Yes, consideration and empathy go hand in hand with respect. Really putting yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking about how your words or actions might affect them.
Right. It's like that saying, think before you speak. But maybe we should add an act to that.
Absolutely. And then there's the idea of boundaries. Everyone has their own physical, emotional, and even intellectual boundaries. Respecting those boundaries is crucial for building healthy relationships.
So not oversharing personal information, not pushing someone to do something that they're uncomfortable with. It's about respecting their space and their right to make their own choices.
Precisely. And finally, we can't forget about fairness and equity. Treating people justly and impartially, ensuring everyone has a fair shot at opportunities.
Yeah, it's about creating a level playing field where everyone can thrive, rather than giving some people, an unfair advantage over others.
That's a great way to sum it up. And what's really interesting is seeing how this foundational idea of respect plays out in specific areas of life. Let's start with gender, an area where, sadly, we still see so much disrespect.
It's true, yeah. We've made some progress.
Yeah.
There's still a long way to go in a lot of ways. So what does genuine respect actually look like in a gender context?
At its heart, it's about valuing everyone equally, regardless of their gender identity. It means challenging stereotypes and ensuring everyone has equal opportunities in education, employment, and leadership. And crucially, it means respecting everyone's bodily autonomy and their right to make choices about their own bodies.
So not making assumptions about what someone can or can't do based on their gender and ensuring they feel safe and respected in their interactions with you.
Absolutely. And speaking of feeling safe and respected, let's talk about age. How does respect play out across generations? We have children who are still learning and developing, and elders who've accumulated a lifetime of wisdom and experience.
It seems like there's a lot of room for misunderstanding, even disrespect between generations. Sometimes it feels like they're speaking completely different languages.
That's a great point. And it highlights the importance of recognizing the unique value that each generation brings to the table. When it comes to children, respect means recognizing that their feelings and opinions are valid, even if we don't always agree with them. It means guiding them with patience and understanding, rather than dismissing them as just kids.
Yeah, that reminds me of something my grandmother used to always say. She always said, children are people too, just smaller. And she always treated us with so much respect, even when we were driving her crazy.
What a wonderful example. It's about seeing the individual, not just the age. And on the flip side, respecting elders means recognizing the wealth of knowledge and experience they have to offer.
So valuing their contributions, listening to their stories, maybe asking for their advice sometimes?
Exactly. Each generation has something to learn from the other. It's about fostering a culture of mutual respect and understanding across the age spectrum.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about culture. Our world is incredibly diverse, with countless different customs and traditions and values. So how does respect kind of fit into that equation?
This is where it gets really crucial. Respecting cultural diversity starts with a fundamental shift in mindset. It's about approaching other cultures with genuine curiosity and humility rather than judgment.
So instead of assuming our way is the right way, we make an effort to understand and appreciate, different ways of life.
Precisely. It's about embracing the richness and complexity of human experience. And of course, it means steering clear of cultural appropriation.
Ah, that's a topic that often gets people pretty heated. Can you explain what cultural appropriation is and why it's disrespectful?
It boils down to using elements of a culture that's not your own without understanding or respecting their significance. It's about recognizing the power dynamics at play and avoiding actions that perpetuate harmful stereotypes or diminish the value of another culture.
So it's not just about avoiding offensive costumes or language. It's also about being mindful of the impact of our actions and ensuring we're not exploiting or misrepresenting another culture for our own gain.
That's a great way to put it. It's about being respectful guests in someone else's cultural home.
Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how respect, or the lack of it, has shaped history. Have there been periods where respect was more prevalent or where disrespect had, particularly devastating consequences?
That's a fascinating question, and one that highlights how respect is woven into the very fabric of human history. If we look back at ancient civilizations, for example, we see that societies that emphasize respect for elders, traditions, and social hierarchies often experienced periods of stability and continuity.
So respect kind of acted as a social glue, holding those societies together.
In a way, yes, but of course those same hierarchies could be exploited, leading to inequality and oppression. History is full of examples where respect was withheld from certain groups based on their race, religion, gender, or social status.
And those instances of disrespect have had, horrific consequences: wars, slavery, genocide. It's a stark reminder of the dark side of human nature.
Absolutely. But amidst those dark chapters, we also see moments of incredible courage and resilience. Think about the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, the fight for LGBTQ plus rights. These were all movements fueled by a profound belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being.
It's inspiring to see how those movements have challenged, deeply ingrained prejudices and expanded our understanding of what it means to respect one another.
It shows us that change is possible, that respect can triumph over hate and ignorance, but it's an ongoing battle, and we can't afford to become complacent.
That's a powerful message. So if we want to create a more respectful world, where do we even begin?
I think it starts with recognizing that respect isn't just, a grand abstract concept. It's woven into the fabric of our everyday lives and our interactions with family, friends, colleagues, even strangers we encounter on the street.
So it's about paying attention to those, seemingly small moments and making a conscious effort to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their background or beliefs.
Exactly. It's about those everyday acts of kindness, consideration, and understanding. And it's about being willing to have difficult conversations, to challenge our own biases, and to advocate for a more just and equitable world.
It sounds like a lifelong journey, one that requires constant reflection and effort. But I have a feeling it's a journey worth taking.
I couldn't agree more. And I think our listener has some really insightful questions about the challenges and rewards of that journey.
All right, well, let's dive into those questions and see what other insights we can uncover. You mentioned something in your notes that really resonated with me. It can be kind of tough to ask others about their success. How do you strike that balance between genuine curiosity and, not coming across as envious or nosy?
It's a struggle many of us face for sure. But what's fascinating here is that framing the question the right way can actually turn it into a sign of respect, not a threat.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How do we do that?
Think about it this way. Instead of focusing on the outcome of their success, focus on the process. Ask how they achieved something. What challenges they faced, what lessons they learned along the way.
So it's less about, wow, you're so lucky, and more about, wow, you must have worked really hard and smart to get here. What can I learn from your journey?
Exactly. You're acknowledging their expertise, showing a willingness to learn, and subtly complimenting their resilience. It becomes a conversation, not a comparison.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shifts the whole dynamic from competition to collaboration instead of feeling threatened. The other person might actually feel more open to sharing their insights.
And that's where the real magic happens. You might be surprised by the connections you forge and the wisdom you gain by simply asking how, with genuine curiosity and respect.
All right, challenge accepted. I'm going to try that this week. Now, you also mentioned some other obstacles to respect that I think are really important to unpack. Things like ego and pride getting in the way.
Those are big ones, for sure. It's human nature to want to be right, to feel important. But true respect requires us to step outside of our own ego and genuinely consider other perspectives.
Yeah, it's like that saying, you can be right or you can be in a relationship. Sometimes clinging too tightly to our own point of view can really damage those connections with others.
That's a great way to put it, and it ties into another major obstacle, prejudice and bias.
Hmm.
When we make snap judgments about people based on their race, religion, gender, or other factors, we're denying them that basic respect of seeing them as individuals.
Yeah, it's like we're putting them in a box before we even give them a chance to show us who they really are.
Exactly. And it can be incredibly damaging to relationships and to society as a whole. We have to actively challenge those preconceived notions and make a conscious effort to see each person as unique and worthy of respect.
And I imagine that kind of ties into the communication barriers you mentioned in your notes.
Absolutely. Misunderstandings and misinterpretations can quickly escalate into disrespect if we're not careful. We have to be mindful of how our words and actions might be perceived by others, especially those from different backgrounds.
It's about being clear and respectful in our communication, but
Mhm.
also being open to feedback and willing to clarify if someone feels misrepresented or misunderstood.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of social and economic inequality, which can create a huge breeding ground for disrespect. When there's a massive power imbalance between groups, it can lead to resentment, distrust, and ultimately a breakdown of respect.
Right, it's like that saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
When one group has all the resources and control, it's easy for them to start seeing those without power as less deserving of respect.
It's a really important point. Addressing systemic inequality is crucial for fostering a culture of respect. When everyone has a fair shot at opportunities, regardless of their background, it creates a much more level playing field for mutual respect to flourish.
So it's not just about individual actions, but also about addressing those larger societal structures that perpetuate inequality and disrespect.
Precisely. Now, you also brought up a question that I find particularly intriguing. The nature versus nurture debate when it comes to disrespect. Is it something we're born with or is it learned?
Yeah, that's something I've always wondered about. Are some people just naturally more inclined to be disrespectful, or is it more about the environment they were raised in?
It's a complex question, and I don't think there's a simple answer. There's certainly evidence to suggest that certain personality traits can have a genetic component, but those traits don't necessarily equal disrespect. Our environment, upbringing, cultural influences, those all play a huge role in shaping how we interact with others.
So it's like a recipe with multiple ingredients. We might have certain predispositions, but our experiences ultimately determine how those predispositions are expressed.
Exactly, and that's actually a very hopeful perspective because it means we have the power to change, we can unlearn disrespectful behaviors, challenge our biases, and consciously choose to interact with the world in a more respectful way.
That's so empowering. It means we're not just stuck with whatever baggage we inherited or picked up along the way. We can actively cultivate respect, both in ourselves and in our interactions with others.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a crucial question. How do we actually do that? How do we overcome those obstacles and cultivate more respect in our lives and in the world around us?
Okay, hit me with your wisdom. What are some practical tools we can use to kind of build that muscle of respect?
Well, as we've already touched on, self-reflection and awareness are key. We have to be willing to look in the mirror and honestly assess our own biases and behaviors. Where are we falling short? Are we quick to judge? Do we interrupt or talk over others?
It's about being brutally honest with ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable.
Right, and then it's about actively cultivating empathy and practicing active listening. Really tuning in to what others are saying, trying to see things from their perspective, and validating their feelings.
It's like putting down our phones, making eye contact, and really seeing the person we're interacting with.
Exactly, and it's about open and honest communication, expressing our needs and boundaries respectfully, but also being willing to have those tough conversations when conflicts arise, rather than letting resentment fester.
So speaking our truth, but doing it with kindness and consideration.
I love that, speaking our truth with kindness. That's a beautiful way to put it. And we can't forget about the power of education. Learning about different cultures, perspectives, and communication styles can help break down those barriers of misunderstanding that often lead to disrespect.
The more we know, the more we grow, and the more we realize that we're all interconnected.
Beautifully said. And finally, let's not forget the importance of leading by example. Our actions speak volumes if we want to see more respect in the world. We need to embody it in our own interactions, even when it's challenging.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And it's about using our voices to advocate for a more just and equitable world where everyone feels valued and respected.
You've perfectly captured the essence of it. It's a lifelong journey, and it's one that we all have a role to play in.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to how nuanced this whole concept of respect is. It's not just about good manners, it's about understanding, empathy, and actively working to create a more just world.
I completely agree. And what's particularly fascinating to me is how respect, or the lack thereof, seems to ripple out from our individual actions and impact these larger systems we're a part of.
That's a great point. We've talked about how respect can foster cooperation and stability, but what happens when that breaks down?
Well, history is unfortunately full of examples. Think about the collapse of empires or the rise of authoritarian regimes. Often those events are marked by a profound erosion of respect for human dignity and the rule of law.
Right, it's like that saying, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So when respect crumbles, it weakens, like the very foundations of society.
Exactly. And it creates a breeding ground for conflict, injustice, and ultimately suffering. But on a more hopeful note, we also see throughout history how movements for social change, whether it's the abolition of slavery or the fight for women's rights, are often fueled by a deep and unwavering respect for human dignity.
Those movements remind us that respect isn't just a passive concept. It's a force for positive change. It's something we have to actively fight for, even when it's difficult.
I think that's a really important point. Respect isn't something that just happens. It's something we have to consciously cultivate and practice every day. And that requires a willingness to challenge our own biases, to engage in difficult conversations, and to advocate for a more just and equitable world.
It sounds like a lifelong journey, and one that's bound to have its ups and downs. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling, discouraged by the state of the world, by all the disrespect they see around them?
It's understandable to feel that way. We're bombarded with news of conflict, division, and injustice, but I think it's crucial to remember that even small acts of respect can have a ripple effect.
So it's not about trying to, single-handedly change the world overnight,
Yeah.
but focusing on what we can control, our own actions, our own interactions.
Precisely. It's about those everyday moments of kindness, those choices to listen instead of judge, those opportunities to speak up against injustice. Each of those acts, however small, contributes to a more respectful world.
And what about those times when we inevitably make mistakes?
Right.
I mean, we're all human. We're bound to, mess up sometimes. How do we deal with those moments of disrespect, whether we're on the receiving end or we're the ones who've slipped up?
That's where forgiveness and grace come in. When someone disrespects us, it's important to acknowledge the hurt it causes, but it's also important to remember that people make mistakes. They might be acting out of ignorance, fear, or their own unresolved pain.
So instead of harboring resentment or seeking revenge, maybe we can try to approach the situation with, a bit more empathy and understanding.
Exactly. It doesn't mean condoning the behavior, but it's about recognizing the humanity of the person who caused the hurt. And sometimes that understanding can open the door to dialogue, reconciliation, and even a deeper level of respect.
And what about when we're the ones who've been disrespectful? How do we, own up to our mistakes and make things right?
That's where humility and accountability are crucial. It's about being willing to admit when we've messed up, to apologize sincerely, and to take steps to make amends. It's about learning from those mistakes and striving to do better next time.
So it's not about beating ourselves up or dwelling in shame, but taking responsibility and using those moments as opportunities for growth.
I love that, using those moments as opportunities for growth. It's about transforming those negative experiences into fuel for positive change.
This deep dive has been such an incredible journey that feels like we've only scratched the surface of this, vast and multifaceted concept of respect.
It's true. Respect is an ongoing exploration, a lifelong practice. It's something we have to continuously reflect on, learn about, and strive to embody in our interactions with the world.
Well said. And on that note, dear deep divers, we've reached the end of our exploration for today. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to think more deeply about respect, its impact on our lives, and how we can each contribute to a more respectful world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep respecting.
This is DigitView.